So I'm Megan Shaw. I'm a PhD student at Penn State, and I'm here as a young professional interviewing for the Hall of Fame of Excellence for American Fisheries Society with Del Graff, who it's actually an honor for me to be here because my dad actually worked with Del for many years in the Fish and Boat Commission. Del actually worked for the Fish and Boat Commission for 38 years, and at the end was the Director of Fisheries.
Director of Bureau of Fisheries.
Director of Bureau of Fisheries. So quite a long career and a lot of accomplishments to go with it. So I have a few questions as part of this interview. The first one is, how did you become involved in the American Fisheries Society, and why did you decide to be a part of the Fisheries Management section?
I became involved with the American Fisheries Society. I started work in September of 1964, and the first thing one of the supervisors said to me is, the AFS is meeting in Harrisburg and you have to join. We're going to the meeting.
Okay.
And so the Northeastern Division.
Okay.
So that's how I got involved, and then I stayed involved.
Okay. How did being involved with AFS help your career?
It helped my career because I met there's a lot of cross-pollination, if you want to say that term. I met a lot of professionals that helped me a lot. Those contacts are invaluable.
Ends up becoming a pretty small
Yes. It is
community.
a small profession, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Did you have a mentor or individuals who greatly influenced your career?
Yeah, I did. I would say both deceased, unfortunately. Art Bradford was the guy that I worked for with the Fish Commission, one of the first supervisors
Okay.
I had, and then I worked for him for a long time. And the other would be, I consider Bob Butler, Dr. Robert Butler, who was in charge of the Fisheries Unit.
Okay.
I think he mentored us all.
Yeah. The Fisheries Unit at
Penn State.
At Penn State?
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Did you ever consider other careers, and why?
Well, no, I didn't really, because I was fortunate enough to get into fisheries when I was, I think I was 23 years old, so I just stayed.
Yeah,
This is the dream job. This is what you train for.
that's great. How do you think AFS can help prepare our profession for the challenges ahead?
That's a very complex question. I think that one of the things that the AFS does, besides advocate for fisheries, is allow people to mix, just the meetings, the sections, the groups. I think that helps prepare you. If you're 23 years old like I was and you start meeting guys like Dwight Webster and others, he was a professor at Cornell, and become friends with them, it really helps.
So you think networking for us young folks is
Absolutely.
one of the best things you can
Yes.
do? What does being inducted into the Hall of Fame of Excellence mean to you?
Actually, when that happened, I was just honored and humbled. I didn't expect it.
What do you believe is or was your biggest contribution to fisheries?
My biggest contribution to fisheries was actually confined to Pennsylvania. I was part of a team that brought wild trout, specific management for wild trout to Pennsylvania. Before that, we stocked everything.
Okay.
And that was encouraged by networking with the guys in Montana when we did the
Okay.
original work in Madison. And it wasn't easy. One night in the same meeting, I got called a Nazi and a communist both.
Oh, wow.
for not stocking a stream.
Yeah, well, fishing in Pennsylvania is a huge, huge pastime, and
Yes, it is.
there's a lot of people that depend on their fishing, so.
But that was 1986 when we finally got it passed, and it was very difficult, and when it passed the commission, my chief of management actually had tears in his eyes.
Oh, wow.
It was emotional.
And many of those legislations are still in acting today?
Well, it wasn't legislation. We had the power to regulate.
To regulate, okay.
Yes, it's still in effect today.
That's great. Yeah, the fisheries, the trout fishing in Pennsylvania is some of the best. I know people come from all over the country just to go fishing in Fishing Creek or some of the other ones. What words of wisdom do you share with students and young biologists?
The word of wisdom I would share with students and young biologists is to actually go out and mix with anglers. Go to outdoor meetings, if you don't know your clientele, fishery science is fishery science, but a fishery if it doesn't have people fishing for them, it's not a fishery.
Yeah.
And if you don't know their habits and their beliefs, if you go to a public meeting, they can sniff you out right away that you've never been out in the rain.
Very true. I'd like to ask your thoughts about other inductees right now. Which fellow inductees influenced you the most, and how?
Well, Getting into how would be too long, but Carl Sullivan, I knew Sully really, really well.
Okay.
And I see Rich Riders on there, and he was a heck of a guy. I was on the Great Lakes Committee and Great Lakes Fisheries,
Mm-hmm.
and Rich was influential in that from Canada, and he was great. And I see a couple of my peers on there that I think the world of, and it really helped me a lot, because you could always pick up the phone and call them if you had a problem and they had dealt with it. And that would be like Bruce Shupp and Lee Redmond and Angie and Serpy.
Okay. Did you know or work with any of the inductees that have passed? Could you tell us a little bit about your time spent with them?
Well, I just mentioned
A couple of
Lee
them.
Redmond, and Lee was very active in the AFS. Bruce Shupp, Angelo and Serpy. And I see Bob Hunt's on there, and Bob Hunt's been to Pennsylvania a number of times, and I admired him greatly. He was a lot of help on wild trout. Mostly it was, we'll skip the socialization.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
But it was having people that were, you could pick up the phone and say, hey, you know,
Yeah.
and they would help you.
So what do you think us young guys can learn from this older generation that maybe is more lost today, that might have been something that took place back in the past?
Other than what I just said about, if you're not an angler, and I think you can look around and tell I am, but if you're not an angler, do mix with the people that are anglers, listen to them, and just so that, you know, if you get caught up there saying something that an angler knows isn't true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I do see some people going into other disciplines that actually don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes that connection tough.
Mm-hmm. That's mostly because academically, you know, things are like light years ahead of when I was young, and the computers and the way you can do things are so much better. You know, we used to have to write down descriptors of where we were. Now you just punch in that long. And
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think today, too, sometimes there could be less like FaceTime with people because everything's done over the internet, or you send an email. So I know that's one thing I think is still really important, is to pick up that phone or to meet with somebody in person.
Yeah, I think one of the things that helped me a lot, and some people never do it, but I went to all, you know, the section meetings, national meetings, division meetings, and I worked, well, I was in the administrator section too. I'm a past president of the administrator section, so, you know, at that level I got to deal with people, but nothing beats just getting to know the guy and you know who you can ask.
Yeah, later. And it always seems, I know for me, somebody who's getting ready to look for jobs, having those contacts is really important too. Because it seems if you can meet somebody and make an impression, that can really help later on as you go to look for that career.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of young people come to work for us that actually were either interns or summer students, and when they come on apply, you know
Yeah.
that person and you know their qualities. Your dad falls into that category.
Yeah, and he had a long career too
Yes, he
with Fish
did.
and Boat Commission. It's a very great agency. I think that might be it. So, I'd like to thank you for taking your
Well,
time
thank you.
to
I
sit
hope you
down
got,
with me.
I hope you got 2 minutes worth.
I think so, and
Oh, great.
you know, congratulations for being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it
for
was a real
excellence.
surprise. They were going to do it at the Northeastern Division, and I did not know that. And since I retired, I said, no, I'm not going to go to the division meeting this year because I'd be like a man without a country. And so they awarded it to me at a chapter meeting.
That's great. And thank you for your contribution to fisheries, not only in the state, but the mark that you've made in everything, too.
It's being diminished now because things are moving fast.
Well, you never forget where you came from. It's
That's
a
true.
foundation that we're all building upon, so it's really important.